Way.
Uh, Hi, everybody. Welcome to Creating Workflows in ResearchDrive with Research Object Storage with Casey Schacher and Kevin Kettner. So I'm Laurel Bellman, and I'm an event manager with Do It, and I am going to be moderating today's session. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and then I'm going to read those out to our presenters at the end of their presentation. And I think with that, I will let Casey and Kevin take it away.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Casey Schacher. I'm the research storage lead for a division within Do It called the Research Cyber Infrastructure Team. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Kevin, who can introduce himself.
I'm Kevin Kettner. I am the lead for enterprise storage and data protection at Do It. My team does of the back-end technical stuff in ResearchDrive and research object storage.
All right. And so today we're going to do a few different things. We're going to start by learning a little bit about the suite of storage and transfer options that are available through Do It, and specifically the research cyber infrastructure. I'll explain what that is in just a second. We'll talk a bit about their uses and what differentiates them from other storage services. We will talk about the expansion of those services that happened over the last year, and that included some really nice pricing changes. Good pricing changes, not like a lot of pricing changes we've seen in the last few years. We'll talk about workflows, both sort of hypothetical workflows that could happen using all of these services, but also actual things that people on campus are currently doing, some exciting stuff happening. And then finally, I'll let you know how to access support and answer any questions. To start off with a brief explanation of what the research cyber infrastructure is, because I'm guessing a lot of people aren't familiar with it. When I first started my position as research storage lead for the research cyber infrastructure, I was still not super certain about what the name actually meant. Like what did this unit encompass? What did it do? And so this is how I broke it down in my head. So the research part, we support campus researchers. The cyber part is that what we do is we support them through technology. And then specifically, the infrastructure part relates to the tools and the services that they need for their research. So we support campus researchers by providing the technology to support their research. We're one of many units on campus that have a piece of this. Our unit just happens to be called the Research Cyber Infrastructure, but there are other units on campus, including all the compute centers, the Research Data Services, Data Science Hub. There's many units on campus that do provide aspects of the Research Cyber Infrastructure, but we're just one within Do It that happens to be named that. And I did put the go.wisc.edu link at the very bottom of the slide here. Kevin, can you confirm, are you seeing my teams pop up?
I am seeing your teams pop up, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's kind of...
Looks like Mike and Zakai need a link to the Zoom.
Okay, so let me just get out it. Let me silence my teams here. So sorry about that.
Casey, yeah. I'll help Mike and Zakai.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, hopefully that did the trick. Let me get back over to my slide deck. Here we go. Hopefully we won't see any more pop-ups. Thanks for letting me know. But if you see any more, please let me know. Okay, so moving right along, some of the actual services that kind of map to our unit. We have some storage and sharing services, including ResearchDrive. It looks like several of you already have heard of ResearchDrive at least, or are actually using it. It also includes, not on the slide, something that's forthcoming, slated to be released this year, called Research Object Storage. Also, there's something called the electronic lab notebooks. We won't actually cover that today, but it's a really great application that will allow, if you think about paper lab notebooks, where you're recording data and experiment information and things in an actual paper notebooks. It's similar to that, except it's electronic, and it has some really great features. I encourage you to get to know it, so that if your researchers come to you expressing needs that this might fill, that you know about it. On the data analysis and visualization side, we offer something called the Data Science Platform. If you use RStudio or Jupyter Notebooks, things like that, think of that, but in the cloud. And so using cloud resources to do that. And then speaking of the cloud, we have an expert on our team that can help you think through all of your cloud needs, whether they be storage or compute or whatnot. And so we can offer consultation services in that area as well. Moving into specifically the research data storage and transfer side of things, because that's the side that Kevin and I work on. We primarily offer a few different services. ResearchDrive, we talked about that. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that if you haven't seen it before. But in short, it's secure, shareable data storage specifically for researchers. Sina is sort of the counterpart to that for departmental units. So ResearchDrive is specifically for researchers. Accounts are given to principal investigators is what we often refer to researchers as. ShareDrive is different. ShareDrive uses the same backend technology, but it's actually meant for departmental use. And Kevin, can you remind me which drive people might be familiar with that kind of maps to
Yeah,
ShareDrive?
so well, if you're a do it person, your M and N drives are on ShareDrive. Many departments on campus, I don't know, there's probably around 200 to 300 shares, something like that, that we have, that people use it for their home drives and things like that inside their department.
So if you're familiar with ShareDrive, you're kind of familiar with ResearchDrive, at least the concept of it, and it's just more slated toward researchers. Another service that our team manages is the Research Object Storage service. We often refer to it internally and talking to people as S3. When I say S3, often people are like, do you mean AWS S3, like Amazon Web Services? That's not what I mean. This is something that actually is hosted by Do It on campus. Kevin's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But not to be confused with AWS S3, this is a UW-Madison S3 instance. We're going to go all into some of the uses and current use cases for it. But it's really a couple of things that it's really great for is archiving and setting up automated pipelines. And then finally, a really important tool that sort of ties all these things together is called Globus. This is primarily, I think of it as a web application that allows the transfer of and management of data across different storage services. So a very helpful tool, and we'll go over that as well. Just want to kind of give you a sense of how these services are supported. It's not just me and Kevin, it's actually a whole suite of people, including probably yourselves, if you are departmental IT. So I represent the research cyber infrastructure team. Kevin is on the systems engineering team, joined by our colleagues, Philip Daudet and Mark Kohansky. But beyond that team, that kind of represents the core service team for this service. But we have our services are only possible because we have extensive collaboration outside of this team. So the IAM team, the network services team, the vice chancellor for research and graduate education is our sponsors. They're the people they're the unit on campus that actually funds this and makes it possible. But one of the most important collaborations we have on campus is with the distributed IT groups. We could not do this without the departmental IT. No way. Before we move into actually describing our services, I want to frame it with sort of the problem we're trying to solve. It's a good problem. It's absolutely a good problem, but it does create some challenges. So the problem is this: the number of researchers on campus with diverse data needs, and this is including, and I would say especially big data needs, is growing, and we absolutely need to grow our services with them. And you may have heard about, initiative to embed more artificial intelligence expertise and within campus and do more in that space, and that's only going to continue increasing these needs. Okay, so let's talk about ResearchDrive. So ResearchDrive is a storage service on campus. So this is hosted by UW-Madison, and it provides secure, shareable research storage space on the UW-Madison campus network. One of the nice things about it is that it's fully compliant with restricted data. And so if people are working with HIPAA data or any other kind of restricted data, there's a version of ResearchDrive called Restricted ResearchDrive that is entirely appropriate and approved for that. The service integrates with something called Manifest. You may or may not be familiar with that, but essentially it's a website that allows people that have admin access to go in and manage who has access to the service. So the account is issued to the researcher, but then the researcher can go out and share it with their entire lab group and also external collaborators to the university. And it's all kind of, I wouldn't say easy, but it's all more easily managed, just going in and managing the manifest groups. That's kind of a nitty gritty detail. And if you work in the space, you probably are already familiar with that. But Another aspect that's really nice about ResearchDrive is that it has really robust data protection. And so you can think of things like offsite backups. If something happens to one of our data centers on campus, there's redundancy built in so that we won't lose everyone's data. It's very nice in terms of data protection. It also has snapshot recovery. And what that means is that not thinking about entire data center losses, but rather what if somebody in your lab accidentally deletes something they didn't mean to? And these what we call snapshot recoveries allows us to recover individual files, individual folders for people. And then on the restricted side, we have some really nice encryption that keeps the data secure. Just in case you're not familiar with what it looks like this. If you think about something like Google Drive, there's this website that you go log into and you kind of access it via the cloud often. ResearchDrive is a little different. You often will, most often it's accessed by using network drives mapped onto your computer. This is an example of my situation. So this is Windows Explorer on my computer. And you'll notice over here on the left, it says Schacher ResearchDrive, and there's also, Schacher's my last name, by the way, Schacher Restricted ResearchDrive. Those are my two ResearchDrive. I have both of them, both restricted and non-restricted because of my job, but they're mapped directly into my computer and I can access it via File Explorer. And you'll notice here are the files that I currently have in my ResearchDrive account. And so that's kind of what it looks like to use. There's other ways of accessing it, absolutely, but this is one of the more common ways. So eligibility, people always have questions about eligibility. So for ResearchDrive, to clarify something, any permanent staff member on campus can get a ResearchDrive account. So anyone on campus, if they're a permanent staff member, can get an account. Students are unfortunately not eligible for accounts. However, the VC, the Office of Research and Graduate Education, has subsidized no-cost storage for certain members of the campus community. And those are specifically people belonging to 3 general groups: tenure-track faculty, research professors, and then a special class of academic staff members called permanent PIs. And there's about 50 on campus. And so those 3 groups are automatically eligible for this 25 terabytes of no-cost storage. For people that don't fall into those, and there are many researchers on campus that do not fall into those 3 groups, for those folks, they may still be able to become eligible for that 25 terabyte subsidy. And we just ask them to fill out what we call the eligibility exception form. It's a bit of a process. They fill out this form, we evaluate, and it asks questions about the research program. We evaluate it, but the VCGRE's office has approved for us to provision accounts with the 25 terabyte of no-cost subsidy if they meet some criteria. Generally, we're looking for people to be lead PIs on a research project, a funded research project. Okay, so a little bit of one way to kind of understand ResearchDrive is to compare it to Google Drive. They have some similarities in that they're both storage, they're both data storage, but they have some big differences. For instance, the type of storage. Google Drive is cloud-based, and as I already mentioned, ResearchDrive is on the UW-Madison network. Eligibility, so Google Drive is anybody that's affiliated with the university more or less can get an account, but for ResearchDrive to get that subsidy, they need to be in those 3 classes that I've already mentioned, or they need to be able to be a lead PI on his funded research program. The amount of no-cost storage is, and now this is a little bit outdated information. So it says Google Drive is 25 gigabytes of no-cost storage. I think that's kind of a moving target. I just learned that people can request sort of like an increased quote on Google Drive up to 5 terabytes for legacy accounts, not new accounts. So this is maybe a little outdated information, but for ResearchDrive, as I already mentioned, the no-cost storage for eligible groups is 25 terabytes. One of the biggest differentiators between Google Drive and ResearchDrive is its ability to support restricted data. Restricted data is not allowed in Google Drive, but ResearchDrive is fully compliant for that data. In terms of getting an account, Google Drive pretty much is given to you as soon as you join the university. But for ResearchDrive, you actually need to request an account by filling out an account request form. And I believe that Laurel posted a link to our service page so that form is linked on there. Accessing files, I already discussed that, and I showed you how you would use a map network drive or Globus, and we're going to talk about Globus in a minute. But that's very different from Google Drive, where you go into a website and so on and so forth. Okay, and then sharing data. Google Drive is really strong at sharing. All you need to do is go into the sharing features and share it out with who you want. ResearchDrive, I did talk about that. I mentioned the sort of web interface where you go in to manifest and set your groups. So it's a little bit different. If you have a restricted drive, your group management is probably going to be done by your departmental IT. So that's one way that we help keep restricted data secure. But so that is different as well. Those are some of the bigger differences between the two services. ResearchDrive has a lot of adoption on campus already. We have 1,200 PIs signed up for this service, and it grows every single day. And it's already had enormous growth since I joined the team a year and a half ago. Collectively, between ResearchDrive and Research Object Storage, which we haven't talked about yet, we have over 5,400 terabytes of data being stored. So that's pretty significant. I mentioned an expansion. Remember that problem statement I talked about earlier, where we have a lot of diverse data needs, including data needs for big data storage, and we need to grow with them. We have been meeting that demand for growth. Over the last year or so, we have expanded our storage, including ResearchDrive. So you'll notice over here, there's a kind of a table where it says old rates and new rates. So prior to last summer, researchers were only getting 5 terabytes per PI. It met most people's needs. However, there was that growing group of people that had big data needs on campus. And so this increase to 25 terabytes per PI was intended to meet that demand. But there are people that even with 25 terabytes of data, they still have more data than that. So they need additional storage beyond the 25 terabytes. And for those folks, we've been able to reduce the price from $200 per terabyte per year to $120 per terabyte per year. And if I'm doing my math right, that's like a 40% reduction in cost for additional storage beyond the no-cost quota. I'm going to hand it off to Kevin at this point, and he's going to tell you all about research object storage. And just as a note, we are now accepting early adopters for this service.
So research object storage is an offshoot of our S3 service that we've been running since around 2019. It's great for a lot of different things. We have a lot of different software products using it as a backup target for backup data. It's great for archiving. Newly added with the new service that we're rolling out is static web content. And it's great because there's just so many applications out there that know how to work with S3, and you can just hook it up just because they're meant to talk to Amazon, and ours works almost exactly the same way. So we have many different groups that have their own NAS devices. For example, like Synology, you can just tell it to use an S3 as a backup target, and ours works great with that. What's different about Research Object Storage and ResearchDrive? So Research Object Storage for right now is only supporting non-restricted data. We will add restricted data support in the future, hopefully not the distant future. The pricing it's quite a bit lower. I think Casey's got another slide with pricing on that. The access is quite a bit different. There's no native web client that you can just use to upload and download data. There's no ability to mount it as a drive. So all of access must go through the API. It's a web-based REST API, and there are many different clients and many different applications that know how to work with that. And one of them is Globus. The data protection is quite a bit different than ResearchDrive. In ResearchDrive, we use snapshots and then replication to protect your data. In our S3, there's some things that are actually better and some things that are not as robust. So remember that it costs about half price, and so there are less features. So one of the great things is we have the data spread across 3 different sites in about a 10-mile triangle between campus and Fitchburg and the east side of Madison. And we could lose any one of those sites completely, and it would really have no impact to the data. In fact, we can even lose some more devices beyond that, and the data is still readable, but then goes to a non-writable state. So there's a ton of site-based data protection that's built into that. There's also a lot of what they call bit fixity that's built into it as well. So when you put data into it, the data that you take out years later even is going to be the same data as went in. There's a ton of checks that are happening in the background constantly. What it doesn't have is snapshots. Snapshots to the user on ResearchDrive are immutable, and so if you need to recover a file or whatever, you can just, in Windows even, you could right click and go to previous versions, and it integrates all with that. In S3, it doesn't work. It doesn't have any of those extra features. So when you delete a file, it's deleted. There is a thing called versioning, and we are turning that on for the default buckets that we create for researchers when we set up the account. But the extra versions of files, which are created anytime a file's changed or deleted, those extra versions are also deletable, right? So you can go in and manually delete them. So it offers really good data protection in some ways and less good in other ways, right? So if you need the best version of data protection, you want to keep that data in ResearchDrive.
Kevin, I just want to let you know we are running a little bit short on time.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really really important to understand is what or who is accessing the data, right? In ResearchDrive, when humans are using the data directly, when humans are using the data directly, ResearchDrive is usually the best option. When applications and other computers, right, are talking to the data, S3 is the way to go. Another great thing is there's a no surprises pricing. You just pay for what you use in it. It's $60 per terabyte. PIs are going to get 50 terabytes at no cost. You only pay for what's used. So if you're a non-researcher and you're using it, you're not paying for a quota. You're just, what you put in there is what you use. And there's no IO costs at all. So, no puts or gets or any of that stuff that any of the public cloud services usually charge you for.
Thanks, Kevin. So we're gonna go and talk a little bit about Globus, but I do want to get to those use cases that I mentioned earlier and spend the rest of our time there. So Globus is a file and transfer and data management tool. It is what it sounds like. You have two storage locations where you're storing data. Globus allows you to almost create a bridge into those storage locations so that you can move data between them. There's nothing is stored on Globus. One of the biggest misconceptions is that we're actually storing data on Globus. That's not true. Rather, it just kind of connects into our existing data storage services and creates that bridge I talked about between the two of them so you can easily transfer data. It's got a lot of really nice features that makes data transfer a breeze. Chief among them is the fire and forget feature, where essentially you initiate the transfer, you can walk away and you don't have to babysit the transfer and make sure it's happening correctly. What'll happen is that if anything interrupts the transfer, Globus will stop, it'll pause, it'll wait for sort of conditions to become optimal again, and then it'll reinitiate the transfer and finish it out whenever those conditions are right. And then it creates these nice logs so you can go in there and ensure that everything was transferred the way you anticipated. We do have a version of Globus that is appropriate for restricted data called high assurance. And so it's fully compliant for restricted data. This is what it looks like. I just wanted to give you a brief show so that you can see, oh, this is what it means. This is a website. You would access your different files your different file storage systems here. So for on the left, here's my ResearchDrive. On the right, this is actually my laptop. So you can create your laptop as sort of a collection within Globus. That's what they call storage locations collections. And then I would just pick what I want to transfer, and then I'd hit that start button, and that would fire it. And then I could walk away. And you can also share Globus collections. I mean, remember, storage locations are collections. So if I wanted to share my ResearchDrive, I could do it through their nice sharing features. I could share it with an individual user, or I could create my own custom groups. I could even share it anonymously with the public. And that's sort of similar to Google Drive, where you can share it with anyone with a link, even if they're not logged in. So another thing I want to mention is that our services, all of these services that we've talked about, directly support researchers by enabling new workflows and reducing cost for them. So a good example of this is, I'm not going to name the specific lab, but there is a lab within the forest and wildlife ecology that is collecting environmental data intended to mitigate the effect of climate change on endangered species. They were previously storing a lot of their data in ResearchDrive, but that a lot of it didn't need to be stored there. It wasn't active data, rather it was archival data. And so that was a pretty expensive way to store archival data. They're one of our early adopters for that research object storage service that Kevin just talked about. And by transferring some of this older data, this non-active data, over to research object storage, S3, they were able to reduce the cost of storage by 60%. This is a large data user, and so that's a significant amount of money that they're able to save. More on the compute pipeline, setting up compute pipelines. There is a lab that studies plant genetics. They're setting up these automated compute pipelines in order to move drone images and videos from ResearchDrive S3 over to the Center for High Throughput Computing, so that they can perform compute and then send it back to these storage options that we're able to provide them. Their goal is to improve crop health and yield and lower storage costs through this activity. And they are one of our early adopters of S3. Kevin.
We have another group that is collecting sound recordings from all over the world in different forests to look for biodiversity and different things like that. They are hosting an application that uses S3 as the back end. So they needed an easy way for people who are not necessarily tech savvy to be able to connect and upload these samples. And this is the solution they came up with. It was actually a software thing developed by a UW-Madison staff member who did this actually on his own time. So great for data analytics and sharing. We have a user in the CS department who is using S3 to both collect samples or collect data from it was a DNS. I think they're doing some data mining with DNS data, and then they are able to share that with their students, and then allow students to process it and do their own analytics against it, and then upload the results. Static web hosting is a newer feature that we're offering. The state cartographer's office is going to be using our S3 to host their huge collection of aerial imagery data. This is something I pulled off their website, and this will soon be hosted on S3. So you can go and pull up data from, and this images happens to be from 1937, all over the state. It's a really cool site. You should check it out and just look at cool stuff. So
it's super cool. It's a lot of fun to play with. So unfortunately, we didn't leave a whole lot of time to ask questions, but should you have any questions after this session, feel free to reach out to us at the email listed here, researchdrive@wisc.edu. We're happy to talk to you about any of your data needs and setting up those pipelines that we talked about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Casey and Kevin. And I want to let everybody know that we did record this session, and so it's going to be available later to watch today through Zoom events, and then also later next week through IT Professionals Conference YouTube channel. Quick question from Daniel. Do you have a link to that aerial view site? Maybe you can pop that into the chat if you have it handy, Kevin and Casey.
Yep,
Um,
one sec.
all right, sounds great. Um, as Casey mentioned, unfortunately, we're out of time for questions, but please reach out to them if you do have any questions. I'm sure they would be more than happy to talk to you more about this. So thank you, Casey and Kevin. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day and are able to attend some other sessions. All right, I'm loving seeing some of those claps. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yep,
Thank you.
Bye.
bye.